Hey everyone, content creation is more relevant than ever in marketing today. In this episode, I sit down and I talk with Daniel Burstein, Senior Director of Content and Marketing at the MECLABS Institute. He breaks down what B2B marketers should know about content marketing in 2022, and we talk about the shifts that MECLABS made themselves in their own content marketing over the last 12 months. We hit on why media properties are being acquired and folded into B2B SaaS businesses, and we talk about the relationship between certain types of content and low-quality MQLs. We cover a lot in this episode, so let's get into it. I was just kind of curious, what your thoughts are on content and brand building.
Well, I mean, here's the thing. We're not trying to build brands. That's maybe why we're doing it really well. If you look at the end of the day, if we just step back, Eric, and we say, what is this capitalism? What is this whole capitalist society that we live under? And I think there's really only two things to it, right? There's creating value and there's delivering value. Yes. So we talk about content marketing. It's so funny when companies and CEOs or CMOs talk about content marketing, like it's this external thing, right? Yes. Like it's something we've got to we better make some junk up and we better send it out to our audience. We better do some like keyword driven blog posts. But yes, content is everything a company is doing every day. Let me tell you, if you've ever driven a Tesla, you drive a Tesla, you walk up to it, and the handle just comes out.
Yes.
The handle's in, it comes out, and you open the door. That's content. That is freaking cool. That's viral. That's something people are going to talk about. That's exciting. And so, yes, for most companies, content comes down to, right now, very digital, sometimes print. It comes down to things like blog posts, like this podcast, like, websites, all of those things. But don't think of it as something separate. Our goal as companies in this capitalist society is to create value. So that happens in software companies with a bunch of coders, typing on a computer. It happens in a factory with people building all sorts of things. All they're doing is creating value. What we're doing with content marketing is we're ripping the doors off that factory. We're ripping the doors off the coders and we're showing them, hey, here's what we're creating. Here's how we're creating value for you. And all we have to decide is what value can we create and give for free? And then what value at some point, like especially with a B2B SaaS company, do we need to start charging for? But we just need to really change this whole mindset of I'm trying to build my brand. Yes. Eric, no one cares about your brand. No one cares about my brand. What do they care about?
Yes. That's right.
They care about themselves, right?
And
so we just got to go with that mindset. How can we create value? How can we create value? How can we create value with the products we create and also in free ways? And then it just comes down to understanding where your customers are.
Yeah, I love that. I love that approach too. And here's the thing, content marketing is not a siloed job description with a department. Content marketing should overlay against the entire marketing organization, really the entire organization, and it should be integrated or embedded into the entire organization, right? I mean, at the end of the day, as you said, like everything is content. So I think about, and the things that we do, for example, is we have conversations with our sales team, and our sales team it's very simple, but they have a doc, and in that doc, they just list any of the questions that they haven't gotten before in the doc. And then we just, once a week, we just sit down and we start talking about that on video. We turn it into little video snippets like this, right? And then we drip it out on LinkedIn. We put it in an email wrap up, and we just talk about those things. And that's content. Right. And so, or a version of content. So there are other versions of content too, that should come out of the organization as you're talking to the customer or you're talking to the prospect, right? As you're asking, what are they dealing with? What are the issues that they're working on? And how do we, as an organization, I'm just thinking about my own marketing department, for example. How do we as an organization come alongside them and address those things, right? And build that into, the things that we're turning out. I think here's the other thing.
I want to interrupt for a second because I think that's beautiful. Because if this word content marketing didn't exist, the story you just told me, what would we call that? We would just call that helping people, right? Yes. We would say people had some questions. We gave them some answers. We helped them out. You know what I mean? Yeah. Now, when it gets to content marketing, we can get deeper into that. That's where, as a marketing leader, you need to operationalize it, right? That's where there are people who have different skill sets, right? So there are the people in your organization who have the answers to get out in the world. They're not always, the best writers or the best people on video. So we need to hire people when it comes to operationalizing that, yes, everyone in the organization, anyone, whether they're in accounting or finance or something totally unrelated, can help a customer. That should be our job. But then we need to get some of these, for lack of a better word, content professionals, a type of people with journalistic experience, production experience, to take that helpful information and then to turn it into something compelling. Because at the end of the day, too, if it's not communicated well, it's not going to get through.
I think that's, I mean, I think that's dead on, right? I think, let's take the other side of the coin, right? So we're talking about how to do it right. We're talking about how to embed that and bake that into your organization and into the mindset. Let's talk about the other way around. So there are, you know, we're 15 months, you know, post, you know, pandemic right now. And what was the first thing that was cut in March or April of last year? You know that something is being seen the wrong way in an organization when you look around, you look at the organization, you're like, okay, let me cut, you know, the content production side of things, right? And in terms of the budget, you know, how do we look at that? Like we look at, you know, as a sales driven organization, right? You know, we want to add more salespeople. You know, as a product led, you know, we want to add, you know, more product marketing and dev folks, right? To continue to build things out. But one of the first things that gets cut typically is software vendors, consultants, and content team, right? And I think, you know, that latter is challenging to me because, you know, again, if you think about it in the right way as a marketing leader, if you're thinking about things in the right way, it is not an expense, right? It's not a cost center. It's actually the only way to really drive inbound, you know, revenue and build pipeline, you know, for your sales team and for your marketing team. You know, you've got to have that feeder unit, you know, that's coming in and addressing those customers' needs, you know, those prospect needs, your audience's needs in the middle of crisis, right? And one of the things that I think you guys did really well was when this, you know, and this is about, I think, March or April of last year, you know, everybody was sitting around wondering, okay, what is this going to look like? You know, events are gone, right? Budgets are being slashed. What I saw on your website was really interesting to me. It's, you know, there was like this, and I'm sort of paraphrasing it, but it's basically like, here's what we are going to do to help marketers in this time, right? Yeah. And these are the three things. These are sort of the core tenets of our organization. And I thought that really stood out to me. So who or what, you know, what was behind all of that?
Yeah, so I mean, going back, boy, was that an interesting time. So we go back into March. I'll just take you back through some of our journey there because, you know, in hindsight, things make a lot of sense, but at the time, it's kind of, you know, the fog you're going through. And so we have one of the ways we help companies is called a quick win clinic, where we get together with some of the key business decision makers over 2, 3 intense days, find where they're leaking revenue, and just help them find some solutions right there. So yeah. I say this because it was about mid-March, and I was booking tickets to Orange County, California. We were going out there for, it's actually a medical type of company, to do one of these quick win clinics, and I'm trying to get on the Delta website. I remember this very distinctly. I'm trying to get on the Delta website to book the tickets. I couldn't get on the site. It's like keeps crashing and stuff. You know, and I mean, I was kind of following the news like we all are, but we're focused on our jobs, right? And then I realized kind of, you know, as following some things, I can't get on the Delta website because so many people are trying to cancel their tickets, you know? And so that was kind of a light bulb moment for me. And, you know, I think, you know, Flint McLaughlin, we talked about, he's the founder of MECLABS Institute. He's a content machine himself. He's one of the early originators of digital, you know, content through marketing experiments and some of the other websites we have.
Yeah.
And, you know, so I got on the phone. Yeah. So we were talking because this was our main focus, you know, again, not saying we're overly selfish, greedy, mean people, but all of us, our focus is on our day to day. I'm not thinking about the whole wide world. I'm thinking, okay, I got to get to Orange County. I got to deliver this. And I start talking, we're like, you know, this thing might be pretty big here. And so that really forced two shifts in us, which, you know, seem obvious again in hindsight, but at the time. So one shift was, you know, we are very focused on creating pretty evergreen content, right? So, you know, through Marketing Sherpa, through marketing experiments, you know, we're producing marketing content. As you know, Eric, there is no shortage of marketing content, right? So we've had to find our unique value proposition in our niche. And we're not, you know, if an agency signs a client, you're not going to read about it here. You're not going to read about the new technology that just came out, the new person just got hired, none of that type of stuff. What we're focused on, is like Flint talks about, is something that would be true 1,000 years ago. It'll be true in 1,000 years, and it comes down to the fundamentals of human communication and value perception. So one of the first shifts we had to make, which was pretty drastic for us, you know, me and Flint were talking, I said, hey, I think we need to address this. Like, we don't normally address what's going on in the world because you know, you could read something from 10 years ago. It's pretty evergreen. But I'm like, this is so big. We really, you know, at the end of the day, if our goal is to help, we really need to help our audience through and try to figure out what do you do with this. And so that was one of the shifts. If you saw some of the, we were doing a YouTube live series back then, and from our marketing Sherpa case studies, we kind of made a hard shift leaning into things like, how do you pivot your value proposition? Leaning into, you know, something that I think Flint was really good in leading. We called it marketers stand together. So there was this idea at that time where, you know, the people that mattered, and they're such important people, are, you know, the nurses on the front lines and the doctors and the, you know, vaccine research and the first responders. And I'm so thankful for those people. That was, they did, you know, amazing work during that time, put their lives at risk. That was fantastic. But at the end of the day, if you're a marketer, you got to stand there and say, what can I do and how can I help? And that's what we tried to do, is show, hey, as a marketer, here's how you can play a role. And as a marketer, here's what you need to do for your business and your brand. Because at the end of the day, budget's being cut, whatever, no one in that company has a job without the marketer, right? Like we talked about, value is being created in this vacuum. It's just being created. I don't know what value is being created out there unless a marketer can communicate it to me. So those marketers, so we are so essential in keeping this economy humming during coronavirus. And then the second shift too is just, you know, kind of a shift in our business model, you know, and how we're going to work with companies, and saying like, hey, what can we do? What is our goal? What is our role as an organization? It is to help marketers. At the end of the day, it is to help business people in what they're doing. And so we had to step back and say, well, for, you know, a time being, we just need to offer help and let people know we're there, and then just kind of work with them more directly and see how we can help them. We obviously can't help everyone, but whatever we can do to help monetarily, non-monetarily, and find some ways to monetize it, you know, on the back end, that's what we needed to do. And that's what, you know, we tried to go out there and do for our audience for a short time. And you know, obviously, you know, I just want to go back to one other quick thing that you were saying. And I tend not to be the cockeyed optimist, but there is one really ray of sunshine I saw come out of the hall. COVID-19 epidemic and all that horrible stuff. I know you're talking about budgets being cut, but I saw a lot of companies do something they hadn't been doing for decades, and that is take a really long-term view of their brand and a really long-term view of their customer relationship. There are a lot of companies that could really have benefited financially in the short term from the COVID-19 epidemic, and they chose not to. So I'll give you an example. Right now, I'm talking to you. The only reason I can talk to you, I'm in Jacksonville, Florida, you're in Atlanta. The only reason I can talk to you is I have the Comcast Xfinity internet service. And when, you know, we got locked down, this became more vital and crucial and important to me, and I'm sure a lot of people, than ever. And what Comcast could have done is they really could have stuck it to us, you know, but they didn't. They actually lifted the caps on their internet usage because they knew people were going to be using it more. And, you know, they were kind of there for customers, and they didn't abuse that pricing power they had. And that is something where, you know, we look at I think a lot of challenges with content marketing is this short-termism idea of like, I need leads this quarter. You know what I mean? Content can take a long time, Eric. Content can take a really long time to kick in. So seeing these companies in this COVID-19 pandemic, we did it in a very small way, but many other companies say, hey, our brands and our relationship with customers and the value we deliver is more important than, you know, hitting a really good quarter or two right here. We're going to focus more on delivering value than in just milking this for every dollar we can get from it. And that was something that I was really happy to see.
Yeah, I think when people in the middle of a recession, and you could look at any of the past, let's say, you know, the Great Recession, you could look at, you know, any downturn, one of the things that you really can pick out, you know, if you put it on a scatter chart, right, of, you know, the businesses that really hit the accelerator in their brand building and in content and, you know, and taking the long-term view, those are the ones that come out, you know, really, really strong on the other side. And there's a reason for that, right? It's because people are resonating, you know, with that message. And I think, you know, again, you could sort of look at like Airbnb, you know, came out, you know, Uber came out, you know, in the recession, right? I mean, you just sort of look, and the same thing's going to happen now, right? You know, you've already started seeing some leading, you know, leaders that are starting to emerge, you know, even in the last 15 months. It feels like everything's accelerated, right, in the last 15 months. But, you know, in terms of, you know, the people that are leaning into their value proposition, right, and then crafting and positioning their message, you know, their company, and crafting a message around that positioning, you know, and sort of doubling down and really not letting up in the middle of all of this has, you know, I think you're just going to see them emerge on the other side. And I think where we tend to have that short-term view, right? Because there was a conversation in the Comcast headquarters between the business side and the marketing side and whomever the powers that be were sitting around the table that were saying, look, we have a way to monetize, right? We have a way to extract more revenue out of, on a per user basis. That conversation happened.
It's a dream scenario. I mean, you can't blame them for having a dream scenario right there. They could have just milked it.
Yeah, absolutely. And then so what happened, right? I mean, I'm sure there were some tough conversations. There were, big PowerPoint presentations, right? All of that kind of stuff. But something happened on the other end. Like there was a leader in that organization that said, look, this is the way that we are going to approach this, and we're going to take a longer term approach, and by the way, there are hundreds of other businesses that made the same type of choice. Right. We're sort of using Comcast as an example.
Sure.
There are plenty of other businesses that did the exact same thing that said, look, we're going to take a step back. We're going to take a long-term view and we're going to double down, right, on helping our community, helping our customers. And you sort of see that now, which is really exciting. So let's take a step back real quick, because we were talking about brands and, obviously content, as a vehicle for that. There's been a lot of media consolidation, media company consolidation with B2B SaaS companies, e-commerce. You talk a little bit about that. Like, what's the rationale? Like, why would you go and acquire a business that's in that particular space?
Well, it's funny. There's this great consolidation, right? There used to be, I mean, and I'm sure you've heard it too. We'd call it, separation of church and state. There's editorial and then there's business. And so, a lot of, there used to be like, okay, we have editorial companies. And then if you're in an advertising or marketing role, what do? Well, I'm going to buy media space from that company, and then I'm going to place my message there. It's a very separate, very different thing. But as this kind of content, production ability grew, I think we've all kind of seen the fact of like, media companies are good and important, and journalism is a fantastic role, and that is ways to kind of spur and get quick and instant traffic and instant attention in front of an audience, in front of potential customers. But this chance to actually own or have or build your own thing and build that own direct relationship with your customers, where you're not at anyone else's mercy. I mean, that is just, it's such a powerful and effective tool. And when you look at, I'll give you one quick example. When we're talking about really taking a look at the customer's needs and putting the customer first. We've got some research about that too. There is a company, it's a construction company. I think it was called HCS. I could definitely send you a case study later if I bungle the name. I'm sorry if I bungle the name, but basically they were a small construction software company, a B2B software company. And so they made software specifically for the construction industry, and they had much, much bigger competitors in their industry. But the head of marketing there, he's, one day he said, hey, like what is the real challenge that our customers are facing? And the biggest challenge they had at the time, this was a few years ago, was getting people to want to go into the construction industry. Just people were no longer going into the construction industry. They had a lot of hard time finding talent. And so they said, okay, we are going to help our customers solve that problem, even though that was not what they sold. That was not the software they sold. And they built this whole community. They called it I Build America. And it was this whole community really focused on getting people to want to see the value of having a job in the construction industry. Well, what happened? That industry was so slap happy, and they were so on board, and they were so excited to hop on that train and be a part of this and seeing, their problems really solved, that they were able to get in the room and have conversations and have their brand on par with major, major brands in the industry that were spending, way seven figures, much, much more on, sponsorships and promotion and all of these things. So, at the end of the day, what he told me is, we just had to learn to get the heck out of our own way and really focus on our customers and see what they want.
Yes, we try to outthink ourselves. We try to make everything match back to, a UTM attribution. And we sort of forget, connecting to what the customer really needs that's in our ICP. Right. And so, I'm a huge, evangelist when it comes to, making sure we really dial in and we know who our ICP is, like who is it that we're really talking to, spend time with them, right? If you're in a new role, a new marketing leader role, like the first week, 2 weeks, preferably more if you have that kind of latitude, in an organization, is just spend time with your SDRs, right? Spend time with your AEs, if you're a sales led company, spend time with your customer service team, like literally get your headset on and you're listening to those calls, and just immerse yourself and understand who it is that you're dealing with, and develop a true persona around it, right? And start, sort of envisioning who that person is. And I know you guys do this a lot, in terms of sort of the exercise around who your customer is and then developing a value proposition for them, right? And so I think that's the challenge that we face, like when we talk about content. A lot of times it's content because, we're trying to get a lead. We're producing a white paper,
Right.
or we're producing a piece of content for, lead generation, or, lead magnet. I mean, it worked.
Yeah.
I mean, the reality is it worked in 2010. It did, and, you had gated content, and you would drive people to that gated content, and, you collected an email, you put them into a drip series, and you came out on the other side and it worked. That does not work today. It works moderately well. And all you have to do is take one look at your budget, right? If you take one look at your budget over the life, and how well your campaigns are converting, how well they're working today versus how well they were working 5 or 10 or 20 years ago, 15 years, maybe not 20, 20 is too long ago, but 10 years ago. And what ends up happening is it shows up in the numbers, right? You're still getting the same number of leads, but none of those leads are actually converting downstream. And you're scratching your head wondering why, right? You're handing over the same leads to your sales team, right? You're putting the same number of free trials into your free trial offer. Why aren't they coming out on the other side, right? And what ends up happening is you keep doing the same things over and over again, right? And in a lot of cases, what I see anyway with advertisers is they just spend more money, right? Money's the easiest thing actually to work with, right? You just keep pouring more money into it. And these advertisers are having less and less efficacy around their campaigns, right? They're just performing poorer, getting the same number of leads, and it is just a vicious cycle. And the only real way to break out of that, right? And I sort of counsel. I think counsel is the right word, by the way. I counsel like companies and advertisers around, okay, let's take a step back and look sort of, at the big picture and say, is there been a fundamental shift in your industry, right? And what does that look like? Is your customer the same customer today? Are those pain points the same ones today as they were 10 years ago or 5 years ago or whatever? And what you find is, and all you have to do is just reverse engineer like a channel by channel look. You can see it. You can just see it plain as day in the numbers. But I think when you're in the day to day and you're fighting the battle, you just sort of miss the shifts sometimes. And so bringing that back to content, I think, is important. B2C companies, I think, do it better than B2B companies today. B2C companies have a much closer tie to the end user customer who's spending money on a transactional basis, right? And therefore it's easier to see. And then, they sort of like inject things like entertainment into their content. They're doing a better job of producing things that are inspirational to their particular customer base. They're doing a better job in general of, what I'm going to call like consumer buyer or marketing than maybe B2B companies today. There are a few B2B companies that are doing it really well too. I think about Drift and, a few of these other guys that are out there. SharpSpring, I think, does it pretty well. But I think, the thing that we're sort of, missing is like B2B companies are failing sort of to connect with their buyer, right? Directors of marketing, senior leaders, senior VPs, demand gen folks, they're charged with one thing primarily, even today, which is, what is my MQL and how much is it costing me to get that MQL? And they're not connecting it downstream to whether or not any of those MQLs are actually doing anything and converting into real revenue, right? And so you'll appreciate this. I talk to my CFO a lot, and we sort of think about this together the same way. It's like, if you think about it, things like your CFO does, right? In other words, like $1 in, right, and $2 out. If you think about it, things in that sort of those terms, your view of the marketing funnel or the demand gen funnel is completely different than the way that we sort of traditionally are trained, or the way that we looked at it 5 or 10 years ago, right? Where it's just how many MQLs a month, what's happening with those MQLs, and that's got to change, right? There has to be, a better way. And that's sort of my thing about content, and so from a content standpoint, can you talk to us, or can you give us some advice as to how to tie like content production, content generation, idea generation to that problem of thin MQLs, right? Or a low quality MQLs that we're sort of injecting into the pipeline.
Yeah, well, I mean, first to start, I mean, one of the reasons that there is this problem is there's so much noise in the marketplace now, right? So if you're very focused on, paid media, if you're very focused on buying traffic, so many people are doing that. They're bidding up keywords. Things are getting more and more expensive. Sponsorship is all getting more and more expensive. Where, again, if you're building your owned audience, you have a little more control over it. But let's talk about the term, MQL, marketing qualified leads. So they are qualified in some way. So yes, you can go out and just buy leads anywhere. You can call them. That's the great thing about marketing. It's not like, science or something where a term means something. You know what I mean? Oxygen is oxygen. You can't just call something else oxygen. So you know what? We can call anyone a lead. Eric, I'll call you a lead. You're now my lead. Doesn't make you a lead. We can just call it that. And so when it comes down to it, you can find ways to buy all these people or get all these people into a database and call them leads. But if you're really going to get to a marketing qualified quality, or sales qualified, you have to have people who have a deep interest. And how do you get that? Well, at the end of the day, if we're creating content around the right values, right? Values that are aligned with whatever value we're delivering with our paid product. And with that content, we're being clear about what we do and how we help. The people that ultimately come in and raise their hand, they are going to be more qualified and more interested and more highly motivated. So I'm sure you're familiar with this, Eric. At MECLABS, we talk about kind of these dials when it comes to leads, right? You can dial it one way or the other. So you can dial it one way, you get a whole lot of them. You can get a whole lot of leads. We do that by reducing what we call friction. You just kind of, put everything down, let as many people come in as possible. So for example, you could say, hey, win a Tesla, just give us your email address. Boom, you have that up there. Now look at all these leads I got, right? Or we could dial up the friction. Ironically, we can make it harder. We could say, hey, we're going to publish this 100-page white paper, these long videos or whatever it is, all this content where it gives lots and lots and lots of information. And at the end of the day, the people then that want to come in are going to be higher qualified. And I'll use an example. It's a pretty famous example. It's not even in B2B, but it is lead gen, and I think it's pretty applicable. There's this guy named Marcus Sheridan, who's now, I'm sure you're familiar with him, the sales lion. He's huge. We knew him back in the day when he was starting out and speaking. And he has a company called River Pools and Spas, and it's a pool company. And so he found out that, what was happening. Well, he'd, get his leads, however he'd get his leads. And then most people, they'd pick 3 pool companies and he'd send a sales rep out. It's a big investment, and you have like about a 33% conversion rate. And it makes sense because you're getting a pool, you pick 3 companies, you talk to 3 of them, then you pick one. So what he started doing instead is he started putting a lot of content on the front end, pulling in people through content, even asking and forcing them before we have this meeting, consume this content. I think it was an average of like 27 pieces of content you have people consume. And what happened? His conversion rate went up to 80% because the people that came through, those higher quality leads, ended up being more interested, having a lot of their questions answered. They were, just kind of getting to maybe a later stage in the funnel. So it's really a strategic approach, and you have to ask yourself, where does the human touch get involved? Are you just going to kind of get as many names you can as possible, and then just so you're dialing for dollars and getting your sales reps there? Or are you really going to take, what I think is a more helpful approach, giving information out there that's super helpful to the audience, telling them how you can help them and how you can't, because not everyone, you use that term ICP, not everyone's an ideal customer. And if they're not, hey, that's okay. Let them know. Let them find help somewhere. So by the time they're, getting to that, MQL or SQL stage, they are actually qualified, are actually interested in your company, and your sales reps are actually working with people that are, wanting to buy, have that higher propensity.
The Marcus Sheridan example is a great one, because the other thing that you see is there were less competitive bidding situations, right? And so they were starting with the content at the beginning. They were having that conversation. They saw him or saw their content as influence role, influence and authority, right? There wasn't even another thought in their mind. They just went directly to, the pools and spas company, and instead of looking at 2 or 3 other different options. So the conversion rate was much higher downstream because of that, right? And so you sort of saw that double benefit. And I think you see the same thing with software vendors, right? And e-commerce companies that have real communities. So I'm a huge outdoor enthusiast. I'll just use that as an example, right? Just super, I'm in North Atlanta, right? I'm an hour away from, the Appalachian Trail. I love it here, by the way. And so, I take my boys backpacking the weekends, all of this other kind of stuff. And so I'm looking for gear all the time. I'm looking for gear for my kids. I'm, myself, I spend, ridiculous amounts of money on like backpacking gear, lightweight, ultralight, backpacking gear. And where do I go for that? Right. I don't go to the big box store. Right. I don't even go to Amazon, ironically enough. And I think this is a really good B2C example. I don't go to Amazon for that. I have the ability to do it and I'll get it in 2 days, right? But I don't go there. And the reason why I don't is because they're not giving me the sort of they're not like part of my little world, right? They're not identifying with what I'm looking for. And, they're not giving me advice. I'm not consuming their content. I don't have any kind of relationship with Amazon. If you're thinking about how to win against Amazon, right? And this is the question that all, consumer shops do, right? They're sort of on the Amazon drug, right? And that's what it is, right? I mean, Amazon sends them sales and they fulfill those things, but fulfill the orders, but the margins are getting thinner and thinner, and that's a challenge. But what is happening for the brands that are winning on Amazon, right, is they have a significant presence outside of Amazon. They use Amazon as a channel, right, but they're not depending on Amazon for their lifeblood. And they have a list, and that list is being communicated with, and they are dealing with, they're creating content that is addressing those particular pain points. And they're doing a good job of really understanding and honing in on who their customer is. And that just resonates with whoever your community is.
And Amazon is a great example. Real quick, Amazon's a great example. I always say this. I say Amazon and Walmart, they are the barbarians at the gate, and you have got to be careful for them because you cannot just sell on price. Like, you're not going to beat Amazon. You're not going to beat Walmart. If you're on the marketplace, then you're also, threatening your customer relationship because Amazon has that relationship. So what can you do, to protect those margins is you need a good story. And a great example I use is wine. Let's think about wine. What is wine? All wine is old grape juice with a really good story. And that's why you're paying $80 a bottle for it instead of $2 a bottle for it. And so you have to look at what is your wine story? How do you differentiate from, the Amazons and the Walmarts of the world, or, whatever it is in your B2B space? Because if you're just trying to cut and just, sell the cheapest possible product as possible, someone's going to come along and sell it cheaper next week or next year, or, they'll find some other manufacturer, they'll find some, overseas coders or whatever like that. So you got to get into what is your one? What is your story that you're telling to your audience, like with you, with the outfitters, to build that strong relationship? Because that's something that right now Amazon can't beat or Walmart can't beat.
Think about, copywriters that are really good at what they do. They're just artists, right? They just are. But the one thing
I want to disagree with that right now. Let's talk. Can we talk about copywriters? Because I want to disagree with that right now.
Okay, go ahead.
Can we get into there? So I think there's this misconception of copywriting, like you said, that copywriters are artists, and that they're these great wordsmiths and writers. No. Let me tell you, a good copywriter is a fantastic researcher. 80% of effective.
You're taking the words out of my mouth. You're stealing my thunder.
Perfect. I'll give it to you then. No, I'll just say quickly. 80% of copywriting is knowing what to say. The other 20% is the art and saying it well, which is important. But the 80% is knowing what to say, and that's where you need that researcher and that deep customer intimacy.
These are the two books, right, that you sort of look at when you're talking about, building a story, building a brand. And, when you're talking about story engineering, I don't know if you've ever read Story Engineering or not, but it's basically... No. Yeah, I love it because that is the application of the research piece of it and understanding, you're spending like 50% of your time just understanding who your customer is or who your reader is, who your audience is that you're talking to. And by the way, that is the same exact principle that you apply for ads when you do ad copy. That's the same exact principle you do for landing pages for when you're building out a new landing page. It's the same process that you follow for a funnel that you're creating for a free trial offering, and same content or same process for a content, creation, downstream as well. And I think the other one that I love is reality and advertising. I don't know. I'm sure you.
Oh yeah, that's a classic. Sure.
So I mean, yeah, and so same principle, right? It's understanding who they are and then using the data that you have, right, to be able to back that up and be able to just know intimately who it is that you're talking to. Because when your audience, when your prospect, however you term it, really can understand that their pain, all of a sudden the doors open up, right? There's sort of the guard is let down, the doors open up, and there's a conversation that can actually happen.
That's great. That's so true. And I remember, do you remember Blind Melon, the song No Rain in the 90s? Remember that? There's this great video. This girl in this bee costume, if you've never seen it, you got to cut that in here. I don't know if you get the rights to it or whatever, but this girl in this bee costume is just walking around this whole video. She's so depressed. She's trying to dance. No one cares about her. They're all looking at her, in some weird way. And then all of a sudden, she sees this park and the gates open. And there's all these people dancing around in bee costumes. And she's dancing around with them. And that is exactly what it is like, Eric. Where the customer feels like you get them at that level, then you have won the customer. So that is an amazing thing for a copywriter. As a customer, so I'll give you an example. This is the most classic example in the world. I remember the Think Different campaign because having worked in ad agencies, you would tell everyone, we knew Apple, right? That's at the time, the only people using Apple were folks in ad agencies. Yes. And you tell everyone, no, Apple, it's really good. Trust me. And they're like, Apple from like the 80s that we used in school as a kid. No, I know Apple, it's really good. And then when they came out with that Think Different campaign, I mean, I would tear it out of the newspaper magazine. I'd be taping it on my wall. I'm like, yes, this is it. I mean, the copy in just that one 30-second ad or minute ad, however that, it was here's to the crazy ones. That was in my stuff. I still go back. When I am stuck, there's a few ads I always go back to. When I am stuck and looking for inspiration and I write something, I'm like, honestly, it's kind of crap. I go back, I either watch that ad on YouTube or I read that copy and I'm like, yes, this is what I'm going for. My version for this, whatever I'm writing of here's to the crazy one. So I'll give you one other example from earlier in my career. It's kind of B2B. It was a high-end a luxury real estate development. And basically what they do is they give kind of spiffs to realtors, right? So if you sell one new house in there, you get $1,000, or two new houses, you get $3,000, whatever it is. And so they advertise in these realtor publications. And so you page through these publications and you see, all of these ads are the same. They're just piles of money. It's like sell in our community, you get piles of money, you get all this money, you get all that money, and then, kind of, stood back and was kind of thinking of the realtor for a second. I'm sure that, of course, they're selling on commission, they want the money, but what are they really doing? And so we wrote a campaign, it was just called Thank You. It said, hey, thank you for missing dinner with your family so you could hold the hands of these first-time home buyers when they bought in our neighborhood. And, thank you for, running out in the morning before you had a chance to put in your makeup to be there for the inspector. And thank you for this and thank you for that. And I mean, not only was it effective in getting people to sell homes there, like there was now an affinity between that realtor community and this development. I mean, at the end of the day, all the developments were doing the same thing. They were throwing out this money, but how are you going to reach them and talk to them? You're just going to throw a bunch of, dollar bills in their face. Or you're going to really talk to them about what are they doing? I mean, that's when you're talking about B2B. So it's funny, when we talk about B2B, Eric, we so disrespect the human beings behind it. We talk about these account-based marketing. We've got these accounts, and we've got these big companies, and we've got these roles and these influencers. These are people, and they're doing their jobs, and not everyone, but they're probably pretty passionate about and love their jobs like we love our jobs. And if you could tap into that and figure that out, man, you have got something. So I'm not a network engineer or anything like that, but I tell you, Cisco's doing something right because a buddy of mine is he's a network engineer. He does that stuff, and I don't know how any of that works, but he'll talk to you about Cisco at dinner. He's just so darn excited about what Cisco did and how they helped him replace the thing. And that's the type of thing that you need to remember when you're talking about accounts. And we've got our database full of influencers and decision makers. We're talking about people and how can we tap into those jobs, their passions.
I think that's something that you guys do really well. Is you have a protagonist in your story, in your case studies, and the content that you write. and that is, the marketer. I think
Yes.
you have an antagonist that is in your content as well, right? There are people that are sort of the enemy, of the marketer. I'm going to pick on IT for a second because IT,
That's where good ideas go to die. A bad IT department.
Right. Yeah. So IT and marketing is always doing this, right?
Yeah.
Marketing and sales is typically always doing this, right? And we talk a lot about sales alignment and things, but the reality is in organizations, there's just a lot of butting heads. And the content that you produce, and the case studies, when you're talking about the plight of the marketer who's got, here's the promised land, right? The promised land is over here. This is where they're at today. You're making them the hero in the story. Here are all the battles they had to fight along the way, right? And then they came out on the other end, right? And all of a sudden, here's the gold, at the end. And that story that you tell, these mini stories that you tell, whether the marketer or the audience that you're speaking to really understands that or not, they are absolutely eating that up, and they're eating it up because it's you are like they know that you know them, right? They know that you know them. They know that their plight and what they're facing every day. And anytime that you have, just like with relationships in general, if you have a friend, that comes alongside of you and holds your hand and, it says like, step over there, miss that pothole over there, because I've stepped in that pothole. You don't want to go in that one, right? Go around this way, go up this rock, right? I'm going to show you the way to the top of the mountain. That's sort of what you guys do. And so I think that's the thing that, that's your story, right? That's the way that you sort of approach your content. And I think that's also, what makes you guys as good as you are. And it's really fun to see. And it's a great example, right? It's a great example.
That is really perceptive too, Eric. That is really perceptive that you notice that, because, I think some, and I'll just talk about our industry for a second, just in the marketing industry, when you look at, content in there, some of it, I think of it as so existentialist, like just, there was this tool and this software was magic and this thing happened and then they got results from it, or this agency came along and it happened. And to me, that's that existentialist approach of just things just happen in life. Like, no, I am not, that might be true. Maybe just our DNA is controlling everything. We're not really making decisions. I am not going to live my life like that. Marketers are not living their lives like that. We are taking control, and things only happen because we make them happen. And so it's so funny how so often we get pitched endlessly every day by, marketing technology platforms and by agencies, which are important things. We need them both. We love technology platforms. We love SharpSpring. They're fantastic. But SharpSpring, as much as we love it, it's not doing jack. I'm sorry, it's not doing anything. There is a marketer, or there's a person behind it that is using that tool. It's only a tool to make results happen. And so when they pitch these stories, it's always either the technology or the agency is the hero. And I'm like, no, and then sometimes when, we get like access to the market, it always starts with a testimonial. Oh, the tool was great, or the agency was great. No, there was a marketer. Even if the only thing the marketer had to do was decide, I'm going to spend my budget here instead of there. They made that conscious decision. They put their job on the line. They put their neck on the line, and they made it happen. And so I'm so glad you said that. I fight that battle every single day, Eric. So now you're really tapping into me. That it's the marketers that are making it happen. They're the protagonists. They're the heroes of our stories. If you're a technology platform or agency, they're the hero of your stories. And whatever you're selling, B2B SaaS platform, whatever, you are not the hero. You need to step aside. You are a supporting role, and you need to know the customers are the hero and show them how they're the hero. That's fantastic, Eric. I love that.
Not about you, right? It's not about you. And it is so hard to do. It really is, especially when you're sitting around a table and you're ideating and you're coming up with ideas, and you've got the, the hippo around the table, right? That's making the, a lot of the decisions. And, there's a point at which, you can just sort of see the divergence, a lot of times in those meetings where there are people that really get marketing, and then there are people that don't. Right. And so your job as a marketing leader is to communicate why it's important to create content, that is built around the hero, the true hero in the story. Right. It's your job to communicate that. If your company's not doing it, it's not, it's not the hippo in the room's fault. It's really not. It's yours, because you're not, it's ours, right? As marketing leaders, because I'm putting myself in the same shoes, right? It's ours as marketing leaders, and it's our responsibility to be sort of the voice of the customer, right? And it's our voice, and it's that focus on who the customer is, and being able to argue on behalf of your customer, right? To, the powers that be. And I think there's I think that's happening. What I'm seeing and I don't know what your thoughts are, Dan, but I mean, like what I'm seeing is that's happening more and more. I'm seeing that marketers are doing a good job or better job than maybe they were 5 or 10 years ago about having that conversation and backing it up with things like case studies and data and other things to be able to sort of power the argument that they have to go out and have the confidence to have a hard conversation with, the CEO or the CFO and saying, this is the right way to go about it. This is who our customer is. This is how we're going to support them. This is how we're going to build a strategy around it. And this is how we're going to hit our numbers. Like all of those things that are in that conversation.
Yeah. I mean, so what I call it, I say the marketer's role in the organization is to be an advocate for the audience, and almost don't even think about them as customers. Think about them as an audience. That is your role. You are out there. You're the one out there making these promises, right? At the end of the day, the CIO or the CTO or the product development people, the people building the software, they're not making the promises. They're telling you, you're out there making these promises in the world, and you better make sure that, you're making the right promises and you come through. You've got to be an advocate for the audience. And it's not, it's not the founder's fault. It's not the CEO's fault. It's not, the coder's fault. It's not their fault. They're doing the right things. Like that founder, those coders, they spend their intense time every day building this product. So of course they're going to think it's the best thing ever and nothing compares. Yeah. And, everything is wonderful and we just need to throw it out there. But if everyone's looking inward, you are the person there that has to be looking outward, looking at the audience, being an advocate and saying, okay, how can we really serve them with this? Because it's just human nature. Flint has a great, lecture where he talks about the blind spot, right? And it's just human nature that we all have that blind spot. Our blind spot is our self-interest. We're working on our brands all day long and our software all day long. It makes sense. But we need to be conscious of that, and we need to step out and we need to say like, okay, how can I tamp down this blind spot, learn about the customer and serve them better? And that's where things like we would talk about A/B testing or the conversion, our conversion heuristic, our formulas we use to kind of step out and put ourselves in the customer's shoes are just so important.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Stepping aside, getting out of your own way. When you can talk like your customer, when they feel like you've taken a page out of their diary and read it back to them, that's when you've nailed it, right? That's when you've nailed it. And if you can't talk like that about your customer, if you can't, and I'm using the words customer, you're using the word audience. I think we're sort of saying the same thing, but, I think there's a understanding and a knowing of who your customer is, right? And being able to talk fluently and, in a just a relaxed way, right? Because you are right alongside them, right? You know who they are and they know who you are. Yeah.
Fluency is such an important word. It's a word I use all the time. We actually got a question from an overseas copywriter. He said, hey, English is new to me. How do I learn to do this? How do I learn? I really want to be a copywriter. And I said, hey, English might be new to you, but even for me, even for anyone, you need to learn how to be fluent in that industry's language and that customer's language.
Yeah. I love my sales team. To your point, I love my sales team, and these guys, these folks are really good at what they do. Quota carrying sales reps, right? And they're made up of a BDR and an AE role, and it's really interesting to me. When we stood that team up, one of the first things that we started talking about is, okay, look, folks, your sales reps talking to marketers. Marketers naturally are going to have their BS antenna up, right? Yep. They're going to smell this better than anybody else out there. So your job is tough, automatically tough, right? But here's the thing. You got a secret weapon. And the secret weapon is if you can talk comfortably and fluently in their language, the way that they do, they are immediately going to trust you, right? There's going to be an immediate connection just by the sheer fact that 99% of all of the communication that they have with anybody outside of their organization is, just bludgeoning and sales reps. And The way I describe it is like if you can hear a song and it's off key and it's sung off key,
Yes.
you know, I can hear it, right? You can just hear tone deaf pitches all day long. And again, as marketers, we know that, right? We automatically have our defenses up and we're just tough customers. I am the worst customer, right? I'm hard, you know, and so, I mean, I don't think I'm a bad guy, but I mean, I'm just a tough customer to sell. Because I can just smell it, right? And I'm sure you can too. And so the one thing that we talk to our sales reps about is we said, look, you know, let's not take the traditional approach of like trying to hit somebody on a DM on LinkedIn and, you know, like do the whole like stuff that just makes me cringe, right? You know, I hate those kinds of sales tactics. And instead, let's just be different and find the one problem that they have that they need to solve in the conversation. And then let's just talk about the problem and let's just come alongside of them and have a conversation with them about the problem, right? If we have a solution for it, then we'll talk about a potential solution. But if we don't, that's okay, right? We're going to back off a little bit. The deal is like, you know, there are authentic conversations, right? When you're talking with somebody, and then there are just clearly inauthentic, ungenuine, disingenuous, you know, conversations. And marketers are really good at detecting that. So you have to, you know, if you're selling to a marketer, right? If you're selling in software and you're selling to a marketer, you gotta just come at it, you know, with a very clear sort of objective that says, look, you know, there's a pain point, right? Everybody sort of has a pain point. It may or may not be solvable with whatever it is that you've got, right? But there's a genuine pain point that every marketer has, you know, and sometimes it's because they're too busy and they're wearing 17 different hats. Sometimes it's, you know, they've got quotas to hit and they're waking up in the middle of the night and they're like, holy cow, how am I going to hit these numbers? Right. You know, and sometimes it's, you know, they're worried to death that they're going to get fired tomorrow, right? Because they're not hitting those numbers. Those are the things that marketers wake up about, like in the middle of the night. Those are the things that they, you know, and having a conversation that's sort of genuine around, you know, what are the problems that you're facing on a day-to-day basis? Like, what is your team facing? You know, and just sort of understanding that. And you can do that, honestly, you can do that in, you know, 120 seconds. It's not that hard to really just sort of understand. And I think that is such a much more effective approach than, you know, again, just coming at it and bludgeoning people over the head and trying to just hit activity metrics.
Yeah, and I think this is where content can come in and be helpful too. So, you know, it's funny, the analogy I use is having had a career in marketing, it's like you're a magician. And then when you see other marketing, it's like you're going to a magic show. You know what I mean? You're like, oh, okay, he's got the bunny over there. And I mean, you know, you see solder in half, you know, you see what they're doing, you know what's going on. You can't just sit there and enjoy the magic show. It's a blessing and a curse. You know, because sometimes when my wife sees something, you know, I'm like, oh, I see what they're doing here. I can't just sit back and enjoy it. But yeah, and that's a tough thing. So where content can come in is, so you learn their pain point, then you know what you do? You send them some helpful content for it. Like, yeah, sure, we got a product that helps, but you know what? We know we have 3 other companies in a similar situation. Let me just sell you some content. Here's what they did. Here you go. I'll send it over. Hopefully it helps you, you know? Yep. And that helps build that relationship and build that trust with the customer over time, where when they get to the right point for them to get the right solution, it's your solution, you're able to sell it to them. As opposed to, like you said, I mean, my gosh, with these LinkedIn, you know, enough already. My favorite thing about getting these LinkedIn sales pitches is it's LinkedIn. There's like, it's, you know, it's like Dun & Bradstreet open and that I've self-reported. You've got all my information there. I'm posting, I'm telling you things. Why don't you ever use it? There's never a tailored pitch in those TMs. I don't understand that.
Absolutely. And I think to parallel off of what to come alongside of what you just said, there's also like the content that you're producing ought to anticipate those exact same pain points that customers have or prospects or your audience has prior to them asking it, because you know, if you're really good at what you do, right? If you're doing your job and you're really good at what you're doing as a marketing leader, you know, you already know what those conversations are going to be like, you know, and so producing content around that addresses it, that, you know, helps the audience, you know, really sort of understand that, you know, what they're thinking and feeling. It's a game changer. It really is. And the funny thing is, it's not that actually that complicated. Like we try to make it complicated, but it's really not that complicated. Just find what the pain points are and solve them, and address them.
Exactly. And from a content perspective, and I can send you an example of this if people haven't done this yet, mapping out what we call a prospect conclusion funnel. Because like you said, Eric, there's a journey that most, maybe there's 3 journeys or whatever that most customers are going to take. And so starting from the very beginning where they don't even maybe know they have the pain point yet in general that you're selling to at the end where they've purchased a product, mapping out what are those steps? What conclusions do they have to reach along the way? What types of questions are they going to ask? And then that's how you build out your content funnel and your content flow. So as they're going through, you're answering those questions for them till they come to the logical conclusion whether they should purchase from you or not. So here's the challenge again in life where I have my goals and you have your goals. Your goal is to get something done this quarter and hit that quota. That is not necessarily your company, your customer's intent. It's not their timing. It's not what they're looking for. And so you have to understand, and really in a good marketing flow is you've got different customers at different levels and you're constantly working them through with that prospect inclusion funnel, for where they are in their decision-making process.
Yes. And so an MQL is not, one MQL is not the same as another MQL, right? This cohort of MQLs is not necessarily the same as this set of MQLs, this cohort of MQLs. What's the difference? The difference is intent, right? And somebody's willingness to say, I'm very interested because I have an immediate pain point and this is what I'm trying to solve today, is not the same thing as somebody who's higher up in the funnel and, is barely aware of your brand. And maybe they don't even know they've got the problem, right?
Right.
So the difference between a high converting MQL that you want to actually hand off to a sales rep that's not going to hit you over the head when you do it, right? A good MQL, like that MQL versus a different kind of MQL that's kind of like, it's maybe not even lukewarm, right? I mean, you see those all the time. Like, and sales reps hate it. They hate it. Sales teams hate it. And there's a reason why they hate it. It's a complete waste of time, right? And so what's the difference between a good, solid quality lead and a poor lead that is just a waste of time? The difference, and so let's if we sort of unpack that really quickly, right? It is fundamentally, somebody's willingness to say, again, I've got a pain point. I know I have a pain point and I need to solve it today, right? And you develop content around that the same way you do, sort of anticipating, a conversation with a potential prospect or somebody that's in your audience. You develop content around that so that, you're addressing those things, especially if you're selling to marketers. You got to be able to come at them and say, okay, again, we understand your pain, here is a problem, right? And when you're ready to talk, here we are.